Britain in the 1950s was rebuilding. Families were finally dreaming of something better, a car parked outside the house, a symbol of hard-earned progress. The showroom windows gleamed. The brochures promised freedom. But behind those polished bonnets lurked some of the most unreliable, embarrassing, and deeply regrettable machines ever to leave a British factory floor. Real families. Real savings. Real disasters. Some cars rusted before the second winter. Some overheated before reaching the next town. And number one was so mortifying, owners reportedly refused to park it outside their own homes. Stay with us because the worst is still to come. Number 10, Standard 8. The Standard 8 arrived in 1953, promising affordable motoring for ordinary British families. On paper, it looked perfectly sensible, compact, economical, and priced within reach of households still counting every shilling. But the moment real families got behind the wheel, reality hit considerably harder than anyone expected. The engine was desperately underpowered, struggling to maintain pace even on modest hills. Passengers described longer journeys as genuinely nerve-wracking experiences. The heating system was practically useless, leaving families shivering through British winters inside a cabin that felt more like a cold storage unit than a family vehicle. Can you imagine paying your life savings for that? And then there was the bodywork. Rust attacked the sills and floors with almost suspicious speed, appearing within just 2 or 3 years of purchase. Owners watched their investment literally dissolve. Dealers had no real answers. The frustration building inside British households was real and growing. But as miserable as the Standard 8 proved, the next car found even more creative ways to fail. Number 9, Morris Oxford MO. The Morris Oxford MO had every reason to win over British families completely. It was larger than many alternatives on the market, offering genuine rear passenger space that exhausted parents genuinely appreciated. The Morris name carried enormous trust. Dealers were confident. Families arrived at showrooms already convinced. But that trust turned out to be dangerously misplaced. The engine developed a fierce reputation for catastrophic oil consumption, so severe that owners were topping up every 100 miles on longer runs. Mechanics across the country began recognizing Oxford owners by the haunted expressions on their faces. But the real disaster was still to come. The gearbox on early models was notoriously stubborn, turning every gear change into a physical battle. Family holiday drives became grinding ordeals. Fathers arrived at seaside destinations already drained before the children had even climbed out. Would your family have tolerated that week after week? Repair bills arrived far sooner than any household had budgeted for. And yet, the car at number 8 managed to cause even greater heartbreak. Number 8. Austin A40 Devon. When Austin launched the A40 Devon in 1947, it continued selling confidently into the early 1950s, carried forward by a reputation that seemed almost impossible to shake. This was meant to be Austin's dependable family workhorse, practical, sturdy, and thoroughly British. But owners discovered the truth through genuinely painful personal experience. The Devon's bodywork was shockingly vulnerable to corrosion, with rust bubbling beneath the paintwork within a startlingly short period. British roads and relentless British weather combined to turn these cars into slow-motion rust experiments on wheels. But the worst part wasn't even mechanical. Water leaks were a persistent and miserable nightmare, soaking carpets and upholstery during every significant rainfall. Families sat in damp seats for years, watching their beloved Devon quietly deteriorate around them. Can you imagine explaining that to a car dealer who simply shrugged and offered nothing useful? The sense of betrayal owners felt was entirely real. But the story gets even darker. And next car brought a completely different kind of failure, one that genuinely shocked entire communities. Number 7, Hillman Minx Phase III. The Hillman Minx was among the most recognizable names on British roads throughout the early 1950s. Roots Group marketed it brilliantly, and families fell completely for the pitch. It looked modern. It felt substantial. Those brochure photographs made ownership seem genuinely aspirational. But the Phase III hid a troubling secret lurking just beneath its respectable surface. The suspension was dangerously inadequate for real British road conditions, delivering a punishing ride that left passengers bruised and thoroughly exhausted after longer journeys. Children complained. Wives complained. Even family dogs reportedly avoided returning to the car after the first experience. What happened next damaged the Minx reputation permanently. Premature engine wear appeared far sooner than any manufacturer guarantee would acknowledge. Owners faced repair bills that rivaled the original purchase price within just a few years of ownership. Have you ever felt that specific rage when something expensive fails that quickly? These families understood it intimately every single day. Confidence in British motoring was genuinely beginning to crack. But the car at number 6 carried a flaw so deeply unexpected, it had whole neighborhoods talking for months. Number 6, Vauxhall Velox E-Type. The Vauxhall Velox looked genuinely impressive sitting in a showroom. Wide, chrome-laden, and almost bold in its ambition, it caught admiring eyes on British high streets throughout the early 1950s. Families who bought it felt they were acquiring something truly special, a car that announced arrival rather than quietly apologizing for itself. But beneath that glamorous exterior lived problems that would haunt owners for years. The Velox body was notoriously prone to corrosion, particularly around the rear wheel arches and lower sills, with rust establishing itself almost immediately after delivery. But the worst discovery came later. The car developed a grim reputation for mysterious electrical failures that left families stranded in genuinely dangerous situations, on dark country lanes, on busy roundabouts, sometimes in the very worst possible weather conditions. Can you imagine breaking down with 3 children in the backseat during a winter storm? Mechanics struggled to diagnose the problems reliably. Repairs were expensive and frequently temporary. Families grew genuinely afraid of long journeys. Trust evaporated fast. And somehow, the car at number 5 managed to make even those frightening breakdowns look forgivable. Number 5, Singer SM1500. The Singer SM1500 was launched with genuine fanfare and considerable excitement. Singer carried a proud engineering heritage, and the SM1500 promised to carry that tradition confidently forward into a new decade. Families with slightly higher budgets chose it specifically because Singer historically meant quality. The interiors felt refined. The styling looked purposeful. Everything about it suggested a car built by people who genuinely, deeply cared. But this was one of the most painful illusions in all of post-war British motoring. The SM1500's engine was catastrophically unreliable, with crankshaft failures becoming so disturbingly common they almost defined the model's entire legacy. Engines didn't simply develop faults, they self-destructed without warning. Owners described pulling over on quiet country roads while the engine simply surrendered beneath them. This wasn't merely inconvenient. It was genuinely dangerous. Families were stranded miles from help, sometimes with very young children, in an era without mobile phones or organized roadside rescue networks. The betrayal felt deeply personal. Singer's reputation crumbled overnight. And the car coming next somehow carried even greater shame. Number 4, a standard Vanguard Phase I. The standard Vanguard arrived as one of Britain's most ambitious automotive statements. Launched in 1948 and selling strongly into the early 1950s, it was explicitly designed to compete internationally, a proud declaration from a recovering nation still finding its confidence. Standard's advertising called it world-class. Families believed every reassuring word. But confidence and genuine quality proved to be entirely different things. The Phase I Vanguard's 3-speed gearbox demanded driving technique that most ordinary family motorists simply didn't possess. Grinding, crunching gear changes became a daily soundtrack of frustration. Passengers noticed. Neighbors heard. And what happened next turned quiet disappointment into real anger. The body panels fitted together with shocking inconsistency, creating gaps through which British weather eagerly and constantly poured. Rain entered from multiple directions. Carpets never fully dried between downpours. A persistent damp smell became an unwelcome permanent passenger. Families who spent serious money expecting world-beating engineering received something considerably harder to defend to friends. Number 3 is where this list turns genuinely scandalous. Number 3, Jowett Javelin. On the surface, the Jowett Javelin looked like a genuine triumph of post-war British engineering thinking. Launched in 1947 and admired throughout the early 1950s, it was aerodynamically advanced, spaciously designed, and genuinely ahead of its time in several important respects. Automotive writers praised it. Enthusiasts admired it. Families chose it believing they were buying something intellectually superior to ordinary alternatives. And that belief made what followed even more devastating. The Javelin's flat-four engine was fundamentally flawed in ways the manufacturer never fully acknowledged or resolved. Cylinder head gasket failures were alarmingly common, with overheating episodes occurring regularly and sometimes catastrophically. Cars would simply stop on major roads, steam pouring from beneath bonnets while embarrassed families stood helplessly on verges. What families experienced afterward destroyed the car's reputation completely. Jowett collapsed as a company by 1954, leaving owners without parts, without support, and without any realistic hope of repair. Have you ever seen a car literally kill its own manufacturer? These owners watched it happen in real time. Number 2 was even worse. And the car at number 1 will leave you speechless. Number 2. Austin A30. The Austin A30 arrived in 1951 wearing an expression of cheerful innocence that families found utterly irresistible. Small, rounded, and affordable, it seemed to offer everything a modest British household could realistically need: economical running costs, enough space for the family, and the trusted Austin badge reassuringly bolted to the front. But the innocence was entirely cosmetic. The A30's tiny 803cc engine was pushed far beyond its realistic comfort zone the moment more than 2 adults and a modest amount of luggage climbed inside. Performance didn't merely suffer, it vanished entirely. Overtaking became genuinely dangerous. Hills required prayers alongside gear changes. The suspension, borrowed from older designs with minimal development work, transmitted every road imperfection directly and painfully into the spines of all passengers. But the most embarrassing discovery came on family road trips. The car would overheat with reliable consistency on longer summer journeys, forcing families to stop at roadside farms requesting buckets of water. Would you keep driving it after that repeated humiliation? Many reluctantly did. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared British families for the car at number 1. Number 1, Bond Minicar Mark C. And here we arrive at the car that genuinely made British families wish the ground would open and swallow them whole. The Bond Minicar Mark C was sold throughout the early 1950s as a practical, economical solution for ordinary British family transport. The marketing was persuasive. The price was undeniably attractive. But what Bond was actually selling was a 3-wheeled contraption powered by a single-cylinder V8 motorcycle engine, incapable of carrying a proper family without the chassis visibly flexing under the strain. Early versions couldn't even reverse under their own power. Owners had to physically lift the front wheel around to change direction. Can you imagine explaining that to your children in a supermarket car park? Neighbors openly laughed. Children at school asked questions nobody wanted to answer. Fathers who arrived at church socials in a Bond minicar reported conversations they spent decades trying to forget. This was not merely a bad car. It was a public declaration of financial desperation that followed families everywhere they went. Britain Rewind has uncovered many automotive disasters. But few came close to this level of daily, unavoidable embarrassment. The 1950s were a decade of enormous hope and quietly broken promises for British families navigating the complicated world of car ownership. These weren't just vehicles, they were dreams, carefully saved for, deeply trusted, and often heartbreakingly disappointing. The families who bought these cars deserved far better from the industry they so faithfully supported. If any of these stories felt familiar, or if you remember a relative suffering through one of these very machines, tell us in the comments which car shocked you most. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten disasters of classic British automotive history, subscribe to Britain Rewind. Because history always has more uncomfortable truths left to reveal.